More than 100,000 Russian troops may have been taken out of the fight by a Ukrainian force that has existed as a separate military branch for less than a year. That sounds like a shocking claim. But on the battlefield in Ukraine, it points to a change that is even bigger than the casualty count itself. An army can now lose tanks, artillery, logistics trucks, air defense systems, and even its supply network not because of one massive battle, but because every small movement can be detected, tracked, and turned into a target. When a fuel truck leaves a supply point, when an artillery gun opens fire, or when a military convoy crosses open ground, the question is no longer whether Ukraine can see it. The real question is how much time Russia has before that target is identified and placed under attack. A convoy no longer has to reach the front before it faces danger. An ammunition depot does not have to explode in a massive blast to slow an offensive. An artillery battery does not have to be completely destroyed to reduce the fire support available to Russian troops. So how did Ukraine's unmanned systems forces become such an important part of this war? How has such a new military branch managed to create such a significant battlefield impact? And is this simply another successful phase of drone warfare? Or does it signal a much deeper transformation in the way modern ground wars are fought? Let's find out here on Military Force. Ukraine's unmanned systems forces mark a turning point in how this war is being fought. According to Ukrainian figures, the force has caused more than 100,000 Russian casualties, while carrying out about 1.65 million combat missions and 350,000 verified strikes. These numbers should be treated carefully because they come from Ukraine's side of the war. Still, even with that caution, they point to a major battlefield reality. Drones are no longer a side tool used only for dramatic attacks. They have become part of the daily rhythm of combat. Before this force was organized as a separate branch, Ukrainian drones were already important. Small units used them to watch Russian trenches, guide artillery, drop explosives, and strike vehicles with first-person view systems. But much of that activity depended on local skill, local supply, and the creativity of individual brigades. The creation of the unmanned systems forces changed the meaning of drone warfare. It gave Ukraine a clearer structure for command, planning, target selection, confirmation, and cooperation between units. That structure matters because drones alone do not win battles. A drone can find a target, but somebody must decide what the target means. A drone can hit a vehicle, but the strike matters more if it is connected to a larger plan. A reconnaissance team, a data system, a strike crew, and a commander must work inside the same chain. Ukraine's advantage comes from making that chain faster. This is why the scale of the missions is important. More than 1 million sorties suggest that drones have become as normal to this battlefield as artillery fire, patrols, and radio reports. They search roads, tree lines, trenches, fields, crossings, and supply points. They help identify movement before an attack begins, and they help confirm whether a strike worked after it ends. Over time, this turns the air above the front into an inspection zone, where even routine Russian movement can carry risk. For Russia, this creates a problem that is difficult to solve with numbers alone. More soldiers do not erase the danger if they are observed early. More vehicles do not guarantee movement if roads are watched from above. More artillery does not create pressure if firing positions are recorded and passed into a wider targeting system. The influence of drone warfare continues expanding across the battlefield today. That is what makes this campaign more serious than one damaged bridge or one burning fuel site. Ukraine is forcing Russia to protect a network that was built for movement, not constant defense. However, the real weight of that network can only be understood by looking at what it has taken from Russia's military machine. Russia's equipment losses show why Ukraine's drone campaign is not only about casualties. According to figures released by Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, their drones have struck key categories of Russian military power. The reported list includes 817 tanks, 1,379 armored vehicles, 4,890 artillery systems, 281 multiple launch rocket systems, 248 air defense vehicles, and more than 26,000 logistics vehicles. These numbers should still be treated as Ukrainian claims, but the pattern behind them matters. The targets are not random. They are the parts of an army that allow it to attack, move, fire, resupply, and survive. Tanks are often the most visible symbol of Russian strength. They appear in battlefield videos, lead armored pushes, and carry the image of heavy ground warfare. But in a long war, tanks are only one piece of the machine. A tank needs fuel, ammunition, recovery vehicles, engineers, and open roads. If those support systems are hit again and again, even a surviving tank force becomes harder to use. It can still exist on paper, but it may arrive late, move carefully, or stay hidden instead of pushing forward. Artillery is even more central to Russia's way of fighting. Russian attacks often depend on heavy shelling before infantry or armored units move. That fire is meant to suppress Ukrainian positions, break defensive lines, and give assault groups a chance to cross exposed ground. When drones find guns, rocket launchers, ammunition trucks, and firing positions, they reduce that protective wall. A destroyed gun removes firepower. A damaged gun slows a battery. A strike on ammunition can silence several weapons. For Russian infantry, this means the approach to Ukrainian defenses becomes dangerous because expected cover may not be there. The pressure on logistics may be more damaging over time. More than 26,000 logistics vehicles, if the Ukrainian figure is accurate, would represent a direct attack on Russia's ability to keep the front supplied. It describes FPV drones flying deep into Crimea, using relay links, following railway tracks, fighting through electronic interference, and looking for fuel or ammunition cars that could create larger damage if hit. When trucks are hunted on roads, at storage points, or near transfer areas, commanders must choose between speed and safety. They can send supplies quickly and risk losses, or slow movement and weaken operational tempo. Every delayed delivery also reduces Russia's ability to sustain future offensive operations. It can be tracked, studied, approached through weak spots in the defense network, and forced into a moment where one accurate drone matters more than many expensive systems. If Ukraine can damage radar units, launchers, or short-range protection systems, future drones may have more room to search and strike. Russia then has to move air defense assets, hide them better, or pull them toward more important locations. Each adjustment protects one area while leaving another exposed. This is how separate strikes can become a larger operational problem. One lost tank is a tactical event. One damaged artillery battery is a setback. One destroyed truck may delay a delivery. So the strikes near Rozdolne and Vladislavivka were not only about two damaged locomotives. They were a message to Russia's railway system. The cargo is no longer the only target because the movement itself is now exposed. For Ukraine, this is the deeper value of the drone network discussed in the first part. The goal is not only to produce dramatic explosions. It is to remove the tools Russia needs to sustain pressure. When armor, artillery, air defense, and logistics are all under threat, Russia loses more than equipment. It loses time, flexibility, and confidence in movement. As these losses build over time, their impact no longer stays with individual units. They begin to shape the success or failure of a major campaign across fronts. Russia entered the spring campaign of 2026, hoping to increase pressure across Donbass and other key sectors. The objective was clear. Continuous attacks would wear down Ukrainian defenses, create local breakthroughs, and improve Russia's position before the next stage of the war. Heavy fighting continued across several fronts, and Russian forces kept launching assaults despite difficult battlefield conditions. However, the results reported during the campaign did not match the scale of the effort. According to figures cited in the transcript, Russia suffered nearly 100,000 casualties during the spring offensive while gaining only limited territory. Those figures should be viewed carefully because casualty estimates vary between sources, but they still reflect a broader trend. Russia continued to advance in some areas, yet those advances often came slowly and required considerable manpower and equipment. Modern military campaigns are rarely judged only by the number of villages captured. Commanders also measure how much time, equipment, ammunition, and manpower are required to reach those objectives. A force may continue moving forward while still paying a price that reduces its future combat power. Several assessments published by the Institute for the Study of War suggested that Ukrainian forces slowed or blocked many Russian attacks in important sectors, especially after excluding temporary activity inside contested gray zones and positions neither side fully controlled. This does not mean Russia completely lost the ability to attack. Instead, it suggests that maintaining pressure became increasingly expensive. One reason for this slower pace was the difficulty of moving forces into position before an assault began. Russian units still needed to assemble personnel, transport equipment, and organize supply routes before launching attacks. According to Ukrainian reporting, unmanned systems increasingly observed these preparations before the first assault groups reached Ukrainian defenses. Reconnaissance drones could identify gathering areas, vehicle columns, approach routes, and temporary positions, allowing Ukrainian commanders to respond before the main attack developed. The numbers show why this campaign matters. The Guardian reported that Ukraine's so-called Middle Strike campaign has focused on targets around 20 to 200 kilometers behind the front line, including roads, railways, and bridges. This matters because timing is a weapon in itself. An assault that arrives late may miss artillery support, lose surprise, or move after defenders have reinforced the threatened point. A column that stops to avoid observation can create traffic behind it. A unit forced to change direction may enter exposed roads or prepared fire zones. This helps explain why battlefield progress cannot be measured only by maps. Capturing additional ground always has military value, but the cost of gaining that ground is equally important. If casualties continue rising while advances become smaller, commanders eventually face difficult decisions about how long such operations can continue at the same pace. Equipment must be replaced, experienced personnel become harder to recover, and supporting units face increasing demands. Over weeks and months, these pressures can influence planning far beyond one battlefield. Slow progress also affects morale and command confidence. Soldiers asked to attack repeatedly with limited gains may become harder to motivate. Officers may hesitate before committing reserves. Higher command may demand results, but local commanders still face roads, drones, mines, artillery, and exhausted units. That tension can turn an offensive into a costly routine instead of a decisive operation. Because Russian ground operations slowed under these conditions, Ukraine gained more opportunities to expand pressure beyond the immediate front line. That change would gradually push the dangerous zone farther into areas that had once been considered relatively secure. Ukraine's expanding kill zones show how the war is moving beyond the immediate front line. Earlier in the war, the most dangerous drone areas were usually close to contact lines. In many sectors, that meant 10 to 20 kilometers behind the front, where Russian infantry, armor, and supply vehicles had to cross exposed ground before entering combat. It made movement to the battlefield risky, and it forced commanders to think about every road, tree line, and staging point. Now the danger is reaching deeper. According to the transcript, Ukraine's drone threat can stretch to around 100 kilometers in some areas. That does not mean every meter of that space is controlled. It means Russian movement inside that wider zone can be observed, tracked, and attacked. The front is no longer the only place where a unit becomes vulnerable. A truck can be at risk while carrying fuel. an ammunition site can be found before shells reach the guns. A drone storage point can be hit before its aircraft are launched. This changes the meaning of Russia's rear area. In older battlefield thinking, the rear was where forces repaired vehicles, gathered supplies, rested troops, and prepared the next attack. In Ukraine, that space is becoming less stable. Routes such as the R-280 matter because they connect Russian-controlled territory with southern directions, including routes toward Crimea. Airports, depots, transport hubs, and roadside transfer points become part of the battlefield, even when they sit far from the trenches. The pressure works because logistics depends on routine. Fuel must move on roads. Ammunition must be stored somewhere. Vehicles need repair areas. Troops need assembly points. If Ukrainian drones can watch those patterns, Russia has to change them. Convoys may become smaller, routes may shift, drivers may wait for darkness. Electronic warfare vehicles and short-range air defense may be sent to protect supply traffic. Each step may reduce risk, but each one adds delay, cost, and confusion. Night movement does not solve the problem. Thermal cameras, reconnaissance drones, and observation routes can still make vehicles visible. Dispersing supplies can reduce the damage from one strike, but it makes delivery harder to coordinate. More air defense near logistics corridors may protect trucks, but it can pull protection away from other tasks. Electronic warfare can interfere with some drones, yet it creates signals and priorities that Ukraine may try to exploit. For Russian commanders, the result is a trade-off. Moving fast may expose convoys. Moving slowly may delay the units that need fuel and ammunition. Concentrating supplies may improve efficiency, but it can create a target. Spreading supplies may improve survival, but it weakens speed and control. In this kind of war, even a route that remains open can lose part of its value if every trip requires more planning and protection. This pressure changes battlefield habits. That is why the expanding kill zone is not only a matter of range, it is a matter of pressure. Ukraine is trying to make Russia spend more effort just to perform basic military movement. But to make such a large area truly dangerous, Ukraine needs more than drones. It needs a data system fast enough to find targets before they disappear. Ukraine's drone campaign becomes effective when detection, confirmation, and fire are connected inside one chain. A first-person view drone can destroy a vehicle, but the important question is how that vehicle was found, identified, and selected before the strike. This is where Ukraine's battlefield system becomes more serious. Reconnaissance drones watch roads, tree lines, artillery positions, armored vehicles, ammunition sites, and troop assembly areas in real time. They do not only look for spectacular targets, they look for movement patterns that reveal what Russia may do next. Once a target is seen, the information must move quickly. If the process is slow, a truck can leave, a gun can relocate, or soldiers can disappear into cover. Ukraine's goal is to reduce that delay. That delay can decide whether a target is destroyed, escapes, or returns later with ammunition, fuel, and infantry support for another Russian attack near the front line. The Delta system helps turn scattered observations into usable battlefield information. Instead of each unit keeping its own picture of the front, Delta allows data to be stored, checked, and shared across Ukrainian forces. A drone crew may spot a target. Another unit may confirm it. A commander may decide which weapon is best. Then, a strike team, artillery crew, or drone unit can act. This coordination reduces confusion and helps Ukraine avoid wasting weapons on unclear targets. Commercial satellite imagery adds a wider view. Drones are useful at the local level, but satellites can show roads, depots, vehicle parks, rail yards, and rear area activity across a larger space. When such images reach soldiers quickly, they no longer have to wait for a slow intelligence cycle. They can compare what a satellite shows with what a drone sees from lower altitude. That combination makes Russian movement harder to hide. Ukraine's drone range is the reason this problem keeps growing. Open source reporting describes a middle strike campaign reaching targets roughly 20 to 200 kilometers behind the front, while newer mid-range drones have been described in the 30 to 300 kilometer class. That matters because many Russian targets are temporary. A convoy may stop briefly. Artillery may fire and move. Infantry may gather, then spread out. A fuel truck may appear on one road and vanish behind buildings minutes later. If Ukraine can act during that window, the battlefield changes. Russia gets fewer chances to camouflage, disperse, or withdraw. Commanders must assume that being seen could quickly lead to being hit. This creates pressure before a strike happens, because Russian units have to behave as if they are already inside a targeting system. This is why data is not just a support tool. It is part of the weapon. The drone delivers the strike, but the information chain makes the strike possible at the right time. The political meaning is just as important as the military one. Crimea is not only a supply zone for Russia. It has been one of the central symbols of Vladimir Putin's power since 2014. Russia's long-range strikes reveal how Moscow shows strength when its campaign slows. As Russian assaults face high costs and limited progress, Moscow launches drones and missiles against Ukrainian territory. These strikes can damage power systems, facilities, transport links, and infrastructure. They also force Ukraine to keep air defense units spread across cities instead of concentrating systems near the front. Long-range fire matters because it reminds Ukrainians that war reaches beyond one battlefield. But these attacks do not solve Russia's main problem on the ground. A missile can destroy a building, and a drone can damage a substation, but neither can hold a village, clear trenches, or secure a road under observation. If Russian infantry and armored units cannot turn pressure into stable gains, long-range strikes become an image of momentum rather than proof of success. When ground offensives slow, Moscow has an incentive to show activity elsewhere. Large salvos can create headlines, stretch Ukrainian defenses, and signal to Russian audiences that the war is still fought on Russia's terms. Yet the core question remains: can Russia convert firepower into lasting results? Some politicians, military bloggers, and figures close to the Kremlin have reportedly become more pessimistic about the war or have called for a different approach. These voices should not be overstated. They do not mean Putin is about to change course, and they do not represent a full political break inside Russia. Still, they matter because this ecosystem has often supported the war and explained setbacks. When people inside that space sound less confident, pressure is not staying at the front. Slow gains, heavy losses, drone attacks, and strain can shape the political atmosphere around the war. Russia can still mobilize resources, fire missiles, and continue assaults, but a long campaign becomes harder to justify when progress appears costly. For Putin, the danger is also narrative control. The Kremlin needs to show that the war has direction, sacrifice produces results, and time favors Russia. Ukraine's drone campaign challenges that message by making movement costly and showing pressure beyond the front. From trenches to rear areas, and from battlefield data to political mood, this pressure shows that the war is no longer decided only by troop numbers or tanks alone. Ukraine's unmanned systems forces show that modern warfare is no longer shaped only by weapons, but by the systems that connect them. Drones, satellite images, battlefield data, reconnaissance teams, and strike units now work together to shorten the distance between detection and attack. For Russia, that creates a constant problem. Soldiers, guns, fuel trucks, depots, and transport routes can become visible before they ever reach the decisive point. Moscow still has manpower, artillery, missiles, and the ability to cause serious damage. However, those advantages become less effective when movement slows, logistics face growing pressure, and frontline units receive support less efficiently. Roads, warehouses, artillery positions, supply routes, and assembly areas are no longer simply places that support combat. they have become part of the battlefield itself. That may prove to be one of the most important military lessons emerging from the war in Ukraine. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to Military Force and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest analysis of the world's most important military, political, and geopolitical developments. Every conflict we cover is more than a story about weapons, tactics, or technology. It is a reminder that every battle carries a human cost, shapes global security, and influences the lives of millions of people. Thank you for watching Military Force. Stay informed, keep learning, and never forget that the greatest victory any nation can achieve is a lasting peace, not a longer war.